1051, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advised. We're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Welcome back, fans of the Volley Chief. Coming to you tonight with another chief from the Empire State. This will be, I think, my third New York chief. Excelsior, I believe, is your state logo, correct?
That is. Yep.
That is. See, yep. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Chief. Take it away.
So I'm Chief Engineer Angelo Sposta from the Portchester Fire Department. We're located in Westchester County, right at the Connecticut border. We border Greenwich, Connecticut, on one side of our district. We're a 2 square mile, all volunteer department. Have about 350 members on paper and around 130 to 140 that are active between interior and exterior.
What's the population of Portchester?
So the population is about 40,000 on paper, and we estimate 20 to 25,000 undocumented. So we have a very, very high density in a very small area.
Yeah, and you know, it's I always say it's one of those things, right? If you get out of the Northeast, you don't understand that.
Yeah, we have houses that we respond to daily that will have 30, 40 people in a 2-story wood frame. And in some of the cases, they're pulling shift work. They're working in the factory. We have a couple of bread factories. Half the crowd is working at night, and the others are sleeping at home, and then they swap in the morning. So we very high density of people in our small little village.
And how many stations?
So we have 5. Well, technically 5 stations, but the rescue is attached to headquarters. It's part of headquarters now. But we have 7 companies, 7 individual companies that make up our department. 5 engine companies, a ladder, and a heavy rescue company. So the ladder's running 2 ladders. We have a 100-foot rear mount and a tower ladder, and the rescue has 2 heavy rescues now.
And obviously, you have Tim Hannigan, so that's just a whole nother.
We spend a lot of time with Timmy.
That's like having Captain America in your corner.
Yep, he just shows up. You just don't know when he's coming.
So now we, earlier before the show, we were talking because I like history.
Yeah.
But Portchester, we recently mentioned that I discovered you guys had years ago, you guys had a horrific nightclub fire.
We did. We had the Gulliver's nightclub fire, which just about a month ago was their 50th anniversary of it. We lost 24 kids in a discotheque while a live band was playing. Obviously, there's been other ones around the country that have happened since then, but the Gulliver's fire was pretty historic. It really brought to light the chain doors, single entry occupancy, where these kids were trapped, and most of them got trampled when they were trying to get out of the building. And that actually brought a lot of code changes and a lot of that stuff to light in the early 70s when that stuff really wasn't being talked about.
It's just amazing because it's you see the repetitive. It's sad, right? You see Coconut Grove, then you talk about your fire. You go to the Station nightclub.
Yep.
You see that repetitiveness of, I guess you could say, of complacency.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, so was it Gulliver's? Like Gulliver's?
Yep, it was Gulliver's nightclub.
Gulliver's nightclub. Okay,
and
Portchester.
A live music on. It's right on actually half of the building. The fire started because of a robbery in the building next door. There was a bowling alley next door that was actually on the Greenwich, Connecticut side of the building. The building was split right in half on our border, and they did a robbery at the bowling alley. They lit the bowling alley on fire to cover their tracks, and the place was packed with a live band playing next door, and it ended up getting them.
That's incredible. Yeah, and like I said, I recently learned about it, and I was, obviously I had a couple of people I can call and ask questions to. So
yeah. I mean, I knew about it, my whole life growing up in the department because my father's a 50-year member. My father actually responded to it. So like when we had the anniversary, I talked to my father, hey, give me a couple of heads. I knew one family that lost someone there, but there's such a age gap, I wasn't even born when it happened. So to be able to get the history from some of the members over the years, it's not talked about a lot, but we have, we've learned about it over the years.
Right. See, and it's always good to bring them up, right? To look
Yep.
at what happened back then, what lessons they learned, what have we forgotten?
Yep.
And it's important to keep that alive. But that's it's an interesting one. We'll have to maybe we'll have to set a side episode to have some more conversation about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you reached out to me today. We said we wanted to talk a little bit about the fun world of OSHA investigations.
Yep.
Now, I guess I would have to lay down the ground rules. Because I'm sure Connecticut and New York, the OSHAs are different, correct?
They are. New York has their own private entity of OSHA, which is called PESH. It's basically New York's. I think 6 states have their own OSHA. And New York is one of them.
Okay, yeah. So are we in Connecticut. We have Con OSHA.
Okay.
And that handles municipalities, government entities that are exempt from the current OSHA standards.
Yes. Yes.
Now, is this your first one, or have you had more? Have you had previous?
We had one in 2015, 2016 when I was a line officer, but I really didn't deal with it that much. This is my first one as a chief.
It's always fun. Sadly, I had when I took over as assistant chief, there was an ongoing one, and then I had two in my term as assistant chief and chief. And it's right. It's a panic moment, right? For any volunteer fire chief or any fire chief, really.
It is. It sure is. You don't even know what to expect, what's coming.
Now, Connecticut OSHA you do have one, I guess you'd say, weapon, if you will, if you want to call it that. With Connecticut OSHA, they actually have a checklist of like if they come into a fire department to do an inspection, this is what they're looking for.
Yeah, so the way it dealt with us is they had 3 individual complaints that someone made against us. We have a lot of contention going on between younger and older members at the current time, and the normal volunteer fire department who gets their whose feathers are ruffled right now, and I believe that that's what caused it. And we've had it weaponized against us once before, back in 2015. We know it was out of someone not being happy that called. But I happened to be in the firehouse the day they just showed up. They walked in and asked for the chief, and there I was standing there. I was like in utter shock when they told me they were the Department of Labor.
Yeah, see, I had 2. So I said when I first the things that annoyed me, right? When I first took over as assistant chief, we had an incident where there was a photograph of a member who was not in full turnout gear at a car fire. And the annoying thing was the member was not actively fighting the fire.
Yeah.
And the fire was knocked down, the member was off to the side. And unfortunately at the time, the administration, the mayor in the town, they had they knew better than everyone attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And when we prepared our defense without telling us, they just settled, right? They literally just went to OSHA and like threw themselves down and were like, we're sorry, we were wrong. And never gave us a chance to even, defend it, meet with OSHA. So that was our first one. It wasn't bad. The outcome wasn't too bad. The second one was, like you said, it was we as the department were having issues with the town, with the city.
Yeah.
And it wasn't internal issues of the fire department. It was kind of the members thought it was the fire department versus the town. And someone called OSHA about our turnout gear, right? That's always the one. OSHA came in and they did an inspection, and again, right, you talk about proper record keeping, proper all that fun stuff that we talk about, and that actually it saved us. It was closed real quick with nothing founded.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, went away, and things were sitting pretty. And then I want to say it was the 2020. At this point, it all blends into one, right?
Yeah.
2021, 2022 time frame. We had a random inspection. So basically, what OSHA was doing was they were playing dice with the town tax codes,
Yeah.
and 037 showed up, which was Derby's tax code. So they came into town and did a complete top to bottom inspection of us, the police department, the public works department. They did it from all of us. And
Wow.
the thing that cracked me up were I could nail with our knowledge as fire chiefs, I could nail probably any fire department on
Yeah.
an OSHA violation, right? With what we know, like I could go in and be like, hey, let me see this, this, and this, and but the OSHA inspection that we went through, the non-complaint one, where they come in and, like I said, they have this big checklist. Which, if anyone's listening, you're interested, if you go to the Connecticut Fire Academy's website, there's actually a copy of it. If you just Google Connecticut Fire Department OSHA inspection form, it comes up, and I could easily like wreck a department by nitpicking things, but they nitpicked. They got us on a coffee pot having a frayed cord,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's endless what they can go after. Yeah.
right, and then there was a coffee pot that had a frayed cord. That was one. My absolute favorite was one of the things that and I know that they actually not only nailed us on this one, but they nailed other departments in my area. The fire extinguishers in the firehouse, the ones that hang on the wall,
Yep.
for not having the monthly inspection tag filled out.
Yep. Yep.
And again, I'm like, not once did they ask to see our life-saving rope logs or our harness inspections, our tool reports. You're coming in here and looking at, the emergency lighting in the building, which is part of the normal fire inspection that the fire marshal does. And it just, it just cracked me up.
Well, so they came after us for one of the complaints was that the chiefs and officers didn't have enough training to be chiefs and officers. And when they came in that morning, right away, I called my manager, my village manager, because we're a manager-run village. I said, you need to get up here right away. I said, Department of Labor just walked through the door. I said, bring the HR guy as well. So I called my other two chiefs. I'm like, everyone, you got to get here. So they could have made it a lot worse for us. They didn't. They could have went through the building. They left it alone. They could have pulled for the hose testing and the ladder testing, but I have all my stuff in order when it comes to that. So I was waiting for it, but they never asked for it. They really went through our training, and it's caused a pretty divisive time in my department right now, because they found that half of my officers weren't trained to the standards that they wanted. But when you have a department, especially we're a 200-year-old department, nobody's ever kind of messed with us. The village kind of stays out of our way for the most part, and a lot of the groundwork and a lot of the, hey, you need to have this, was never really set in stone. It was they kind of just left us alone. Not saying that that's right or it's wrong, but we have a lot of older members. With 350 people on the roll calls between the companies, we got to have probably, I would say, 60 or 70 50-year members. These guys have been fighting in the buildings for years and years, and we're a very busy department. And now some of those guys never had anything more than essentials, and nobody ever really kind of pushed them to have anything more than essentials. So you have a lot of like middle-aged guys who weren't really pushed either. Some of them were officers, and now it's a shock. Like, oh my God, what do you mean I have to do this? What do you mean I have to go to this class? So I see it on both sides of it. Obviously, as a chief now, with the liability and the amount of requirements. I mean, you know it well. I've listened to some of your other podcasts. There's no way around it anymore. It's just not acceptable anymore. And the liability is through the roof.
No, and that's what it is, right? It's that, that the evolving times. Now, if you take the OSHA standard, and we all know how loosely written it is, but it does have a section in there that says that, instructors and officers are required to have additional training. Now, by the OSHA standard, that's all it says is additional training for the firefighters. It doesn't lay that out. OSHA usually will then turn around and cite, the NFPA 1021, the officer standard.
Yeah.
But it is like I joke when I go teach my the volunteer command post thing about how you have to have officer training. But what does that mean? What does officer training mean? And
that was probably the biggest contention within my department. That first officers meeting after this whole thing came out, and I told them, I said, we're being investigated. We kind of laid out I showed everyone the violation. And when they came back with the report, they're saying, OSHA was saying, all your officers have to have Officer 1, New York State Fire Officer 1. So now you have a lot of older members in the department, and you have a lot of guys that have a lot of knowledge in this stuff. They're saying we don't have to have Officer 1. Who said that? And that's what PESH is saying. They're following the recommendations of best practice, but best practice is not law. So we got into a tit for tat kind of thing. Well, you're trying to tell us we have to do stuff that's only recommendations, but on the PESH side and on the OSHA side, it's law. You can be violated for it. So that really created a lot of miscommunication on a lot of different members and how we go forward. But they want Officer 1, and they don't want to hear anything about it. That's what they want. So that's what we have to abide by.
Correct. And see, I thankfully, when OSHA came in and did our complete investigation, it was right after COVID, and I've said it before on the show, but I had COVID money, and I bought the Fire Rescue One platform. And when I bought it, I went in and I created different tracks. So if you were a firefighter, you did, these classes. If you were an engineer, you did these classes. If you were an officer, you did these classes. And when the, OSHA came in, the inspector sat down and said, I want to see your training records. And I went over to the Fire Rescue One platform and hit print. And it was something like 187 pages of training records, and walked in and dropped the stack down on the table.
Yep.
And it was just, and I said, look, it's broken up by track. This is what, and it's led me to having a few conversations with people, because I say, look, it's online training, right? There's a couple, the officer training, it's like manager stuff. It's how to manage people. Is it as good as hands-on in classroom training? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, is I guess you say, as dry as that training was, it checked a giant box.
Exactly.
And when you're wearing the white hat, that sometimes checking the box is as important. And I hate to say this, but the world we live in, how litigious everybody is, and how having your ducks in a row is just as important as taking the time to do that training is sometimes just as important to do, like stretching a line or throwing a ladder, because that's what they're going to nail you on.
Exactly.
And in my program, I have a slide that says, like, what does the NIOSH report say? And again, like you mentioned, if something happened, God forbid, to a person who has 40 years experience in the department, they've have their Fire One, but they've never, progressed from that because they joined the department in the 90s, and now they're a lieutenant. What's it going to say, that you had a firefighter or an officer that wasn't qualified?
Yeah.
Well, again, the guy's got a ton of experience, but he doesn't have that paper to back him, and it's tough, because how do you guys choose officers?
So each individual company does their own elections. It's not run through the department.
Okay, so like that's how we do that, and the only thing was the chief has ultimate say, and there were a few people that I didn't think were qualified, that I still don't think that they were qualified, And I had to tell a couple officers, like, yeah, you could be an officer all you want in your firehouse, but you're not at my fire scene.
So that's actually what just happened. So the village asked for an extension so that we can get all these guys through these classes, like the current sitting officers. And we got the extension, and we have a lot of the officers are in the current curriculum right now up at the county training center. Um, but the village had to make a deal with OSHA to keep them at bay until these members are up to speed. And one of those things was is that if you're not trained, you can't be operational on the scene. You can at your meeting and in your firehouse, you can be whatever you want, but out on the scene, you if you don't have the training and you don't have the ICS and you don't have all that stuff, you're not taking command and you're not going to act in an officer role. And the village actually put their foot down with that. That didn't even come from me because they don't want this. They don't want the liability for it. So
No, and it's just, again, like we said, it goes back to that liability. What do you say? I can remember when I got promoted to lieutenant, and the time that the fire chief was Chief Thode, and that was his speech to us was, "What are you going to say to me?" Right? When something happens, what are you going to say?
yep.
And it's a tough choice, and problems in the volunteer fire service nowadays, recruiting, retention. Well, now you tell someone, hey, look, thanks for joining. You're a great guy. We've been using you. You got your certifications, but we want you to move up. And oh, by the way, your reward is you got to go sit through another 120 hours of training.
Yeah, and the hard part with that, and just like you hit it right on the head. How do I tell these guys that I've had 30, 40 years in the department, what you did is not good enough, all because of a piece of paper? I mean, I can understand their frustration with it, but at the end of the day, that little piece of paper is what's going to be brought up in court when you're sitting on the stand because something happened. But it's a big commitment in this day and age with people with kids and two jobs and everything else going on in the world. It's very hard. Our 18 and 20-year-old members that really don't have careers yet, it's easier for them to go take these officer classes than the guys that have all the experience, because I mean, like, I have 3 kids at home. I can't just run away anymore. I can't just get locked up in a class for 3 months anymore. It's impossible. So I see both sides of it, but it's hard now. It's getting harder too.
It is. It's just insane. Like everything nowadays, the regulation is so much. I
Yeah.
mean, you think about what has to, and you try to explain this to the city leaders and budget people, what goes into equipping, training, and preparing a person to be a firefighter, and you really see why we have such a decline of volunteerism in the fire service. I mean,
Yep.
it's just become. We can go on a tangent for hours here of how crazy some of it has gotten, but it's not going to get better anytime soon.
No, and for a 2 square mile village, I mean, we're running over 1,500 calls, and we don't do any EMS. 1,500 calls is a lot of calls for a all volunteer department. And we also provide coverage to Rye Brook too, our neighboring community. They have a small contingent of career staff, but we have a like a intermunicipal agreement with them, and we respond to them as well with 3 engines, a ladder, and a rescue for every one of their calls. So my guys are getting just beat up day in and day out, and then to get a lot of stuff extra thrown on their backs, it's hard. It's a challenge right now.
It is, and the sad part is, if we could figure out the solution, we'd be rich.
Oh yeah, yeah. Not just us.
It's everywhere.
Yep. Yep.
That's one of the comforting things, is you realize that we're all in it together.
Yep. Well, I was a line officer for 16 years, and all those years that I was a line officer did not prepare me for what I was going to do when I stepped into the head chief position. I thought I knew everything, and I didn't know nothing.
Yeah, it is. It's a humbling moment when you realize, and that's, to me, that's a sign of a good chief, when
Yeah.
you become a chief and you take that gut check of,
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it's a big one.
and it's a big one. So,
Yeah.
well, hey, like I always say, I like to keep them around 20 minutes. We're just a little bit over. So, you know, Chief, thank you very much for
Absolutely.
coming on. I definitely, you know, obviously I want to touch back on the fire. We'll have to set something up around the, you know, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you, Chief. Have a good
All
night.
right. You have a good night. Thanks.
FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.